The snow came down like punishment. Lena Cruz stood at the base of White Claw Ridge, staring up at the gray-white wall of mountain that disappeared into low clouds, and wondered, not for the first time in the last 3 days, if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Her boots were soaked through. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. The pack on her back felt like it had doubled in weight since morning, and every breath burned cold in her lungs. She'd paid a guide $200 to bring her this far. He'd taken the money, driven her up the logging road until the snow got too deep, then pointed at the ridge and said, 6 miles that way, maybe 7. Hard to tell in this. Then he turned the truck around and left her there. That was 4 hours ago. Now the light was fading, the wind was picking up, and Lena was beginning to understand why 7 women before her had turned around. But turning around wasn't an option, not for her. She adjusted the pack straps, ignored the screaming in her shoulders, and kept walking. The trail, if you could call it that, was barely visible under 2 feet of fresh powder. Lena had to guess half the time, following the gaps between trees and hoping she was headed in the right direction. Twice she broke through a hidden drift and sank to her waist, wasting precious energy hauling herself out. Her phone had died that morning. No signal anyway, this far out. She was alone in a way most people never experienced. The kind of alone where if something went wrong, if she twisted an ankle or got turned around, nobody would find her until spring thaw. If then. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost peaceful. No one knew where she was. No one could reach her. For the first time in 2 years, Lena wasn't looking over her shoulder. She pushed forward. By the time she saw the cabin, full dark had fallen. It appeared suddenly through the trees, a low structure of weathered logs and a stone chimney, smoke rising thin and gray against the black sky. A single window glowed with firelight. Lena stopped, breathing hard, steam rising from her jacket. So this was it, the end of the line. She'd heard about Ronan Hale from a woman in Timber Falls, 3 towns, and 200 miles back. The woman, a waitress named Carol, who'd served Lena coffee and unsolicited advice, had mentioned him almost as a joke. "You looking to disappear?" Carol had said, refilling Lena's cup. "There's a man up on White Claw who takes in women. Lives off-grid. No electricity, no running water, no contact with the outside world. He'll let you stay if you can handle the work. Most can't." Lena had asked how many had tried. 7, last I heard. None of them lasted a winter. "Why not?" Carol had shrugged. "Some said it was too hard, some said he was too hard. One girl told me he barely spoke 10 words to her in 3 months. Said it was like living with a ghost." She'd leaned in, voice dropping. "But between you and me, I think they just couldn't handle being that far from everything. Up there, you got nothing but yourself and the mountain. And most people don't like what they find when it's just them." Lena had finished her coffee and asked for directions. Now standing in the snow outside Ronan Hale's cabin, she felt the full weight of what she was doing settle over her. This wasn't a plan. It was desperation dressed up as a choice. But desperation was all she had left. She walked up to the door and knocked. Silence. She knocked again, harder. From inside she heard movement, heavy boots on wood floor, something scraping. Then the door swung open. Ronan Hale was not what she expected. She'd pictured someone older, maybe, grizzled and bent. The kind of hermit you saw in movies, half wild and suspicious. The man in the doorway was maybe 40, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back and several days of beard on a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountain. His eyes were gray-blue, cold as January sky, and they swept over her with zero warmth. "No," he said, and started to close the door. Lena jammed her boot in the gap. "Wait." He looked down at her boot, then back up at her face. His expression didn't change. "I'm done with this. Go home." "I don't have a home." "Not my problem." "I can work. I'm strong. I won't complain." "They all say that." His voice was flat, bored even, like he'd had this conversation too many times to care. "You'll last a week, maybe 2. Then you'll start crying about how hard it is, how lonely, how you didn't think it would be like this. And I'll have wasted my time and my supplies on someone who just needed a place to hide for a minute." Lena felt something sharp twist in her chest, anger maybe, or just exhaustion finally catching up. "I didn't walk 7 miles through a blizzard to waste your time," she said. "I came here because I have nowhere else to go. So either let me in or tell me now so I can try to make it back before I freeze to death. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not sympathy. She didn't think he had that in him, but maybe recognition. He studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. "You can stay tonight," he said. "Morning. We'll see." Lena stepped inside before he could change his mind. The cabin was small. One main room with a wood stove, a rough-built table, shelves stacked with supplies. A ladder in the corner led up to a loft. The air smelled like smoke and coffee and something cooking in a cast-iron pot. It was warm. That was all Lena cared about. She dropped her pack by the door and stood there dripping snowmelt onto the floor. Ronan shut the door, slid a heavy bolt across, and moved past her without a word. He went to the stove, stirred whatever was in the pot, then ladled some into a bowl and set it on the table. "Eat," he said. "Then sleep. Loft's up there. Blankets in the chest." "Thank you." He didn't respond, just turned away and busied himself with something near the shelves. Lena sat down at the table and picked up the spoon. The food was some kind of stew, venison maybe, with root vegetables. It was plain, undersalted, but it was hot, and she was starving. She ate in silence while Ronan moved around the cabin, doing small tasks, adding wood to the stove, checking the window latch, organizing tools on a bench. He didn't look at her, didn't speak. It was like she wasn't there. When she finished eating, she washed the bowl in a bucket of water near the door, then climbed the ladder to the loft. The space was narrow, barely tall enough to sit up in, with a thin mattress and a pile of heavy wool blankets. Lena pulled off her wet boots and jacket, crawled under the blankets, and closed her eyes. She was asleep before she could think about tomorrow. She woke to the sound of the door opening. Gray light filtered through the loft's single window. Lena sat up, disoriented, her body stiff and aching from yesterday's hike. Below, she heard Ronan moving around, boots on the floor, the scrape of something heavy being dragged. She climbed down the ladder. Ronan was standing by the door, dressed in a heavy coat and gloves, an axe in one hand. He glanced at her. "You're up. What time is it?" "Dawn. Maybe a little after." He shouldered the axe. "I'm going to split wood. You want to stay, you work. Prove you're not like the others." Lena's mouth was dry. Her muscles screamed just from climbing down the ladder, but she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to decide if she was serious. Then he said, "Get dressed. Meet me outside." He left. Lena pulled on her jacket and boots, still damp, still cold, and followed him out into the snow. The morning was brutal. The sky was white, the wind sharp, and the temperature had to be below zero. Lena's breath came out in clouds. Ronan was already at the woodpile, swinging the axe with a rhythm that looked effortless. Each strike split a log clean down the middle. He didn't stop when she approached, just said, "Stack." Lena looked at the growing pile of split wood, then at the shed 20 feet away. She got to work. For the next 3 hours, she hauled wood, back and forth, load after load, her arms burning, her back screaming. The cold bit at her face and hands, sweat soaked through her shirt under the jacket, then froze. Ronan didn't slow down, didn't take a break. He just kept swinging, and she kept stacking. At some point, she lost feeling in her fingers. At another, she slipped on ice and went down hard, splitting her lip on a log. She got up, kept going. When the pile was finally stacked, Ronan set down the axe and looked at her, blood on her lip, hands shaking, breath ragged. He nodded once. "Inside." They went back to the cabin. Lena collapsed into a chair while Ronan made coffee on the stove. He poured 2 cups, set one in front of her, and sat down across the table. He drank his coffee black, watching her. "Why are you here?" he said finally. Lena wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat sink into her frozen fingers. "I told you, I don't have anywhere else." "That's not an answer." She met his eyes. They were hard, unreadable. "It's the only one I'm giving." Something passed across his face, not quite approval, but not hostility either. He took another sip of coffee. "You're better than the last 2. They quit after an hour." "How long did the others last?" "Longest was 3 months, shortest was 4 days. He set his cup down. "They all left the same way. Crying, angry, blaming me for not being what they thought I'd be. What did they think you'd be? Someone who'd save them. His voice was flat. Someone who'd make them feel less alone. I'm not that person. I'm not asking you to be. He studied her. Then what are you asking? A place to stay, work to do, that's it. Ronan leaned back in his chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, you can stay, but there are rules. I'm listening. You pull your weight, every day, no exceptions. If you can't do the work, you leave. Fine. You don't touch my things without asking. You don't go through my stuff. You respect boundaries. Okay. And you don't expect anything from me. His eyes were cold now. I'm not your friend. I'm not your partner. I'm not going to talk to you about your feelings or hold your hand when it gets hard. You're here to survive, same as me. That's all. Lena felt something tighten in her chest. Not hurt exactly, but something close. She nodded. I understand. Good. He stood up, drained the last of his coffee. Rest today. Tomorrow, real work starts. He grabbed his coat and went back outside. Lena sat alone at the table, staring into her cup. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but something about the way Ronan looked at her, like she was already gone, like he was just waiting for her to prove him right, made her want to scream, or prove him wrong. She wasn't sure which. The first week was hell. Ronan worked from dawn until full dark, and he expected her to keep pace, hauling water from the creek, chopping firewood, repairing the roof where snow had damaged the shingles, setting traps for small game. Lena's body broke down piece by piece. Blisters on her hands turned to calluses, muscles she didn't know she had screamed every morning when she woke. And Ronan barely spoke. He gave instructions, short, clipped, efficient. Bring the water. Check the traps. Clean the stovepipe. But he didn't make conversation. Didn't ask about her day. Barely looked at her unless she was doing something wrong. At meals, they ate in silence. At night, he sat by the fire sharpening tools or mending gear, and she retreated to the loft, too exhausted to do anything but sleep. It was like living with a stone. On the 8th day, Lena broke a trap. She'd been checking the line near the creek when the mechanism slipped and the spring snapped, cutting a gash across her forearm. She swore, dropped the trap, and pressed her other hand against the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers. By the time she made it back to the cabin, her sleeve was soaked. Ronan was inside, kneeling by the stove. He looked up when she came in, saw the blood, and stood. What happened? Trap broke. I'm fine. Sit down. I can handle it. Sit down. His voice wasn't loud, but something in it made her obey. She sat at the table while Ronan pulled a first aid kit from one of the shelves. He set it down, rolled up her sleeve, and examined the cut. It's not deep, he said, but it needs cleaning. He poured water from a jug over the wound, then dabbed it with a cloth soaked in something that burned like fire. Lena bit down on a gasp. Ronan glanced at her. You're tougher than you look. Thanks, I think. He wrapped the wound with gauze, his hands surprisingly gentle, then sat back. You need to be more careful. Out here, a cut like this can turn bad fast. I know. Do you? He met her eyes. Because if you get an infection, there's no hospital to run to. No antibiotics, just me, and I'm not a doctor. Lena felt a flicker of irritation. I said I know. Then act like it. He stood, put the kit away, and went back to the stove. Lena stared at her bandaged arm, jaw tight. She wanted to snap at him, to tell him that she wasn't stupid, that she didn't need him treating her like a child. But she also knew he was right. Out here, mistakes had weight. So she swallowed her pride and said, Thank you. Ronan didn't turn around. Don't break any more traps. 2 weeks in, the first real storm hit. Lena woke to the sound of wind howling around the cabin, rattling the shutters. She climbed down from the loft and found Ronan already up, standing by the window. How bad? She asked. Bad enough. He turned to her. We're snowed in for at least 3 days, maybe more. Her stomach sank. 3 days trapped in this cabin with a man who barely spoke to her. Great. Ronan seemed to read her mind. If you're bored, there's work to do inside. Gear needs mending, food needs sorting, or you can just sit. Your call. I'll work. He nodded. Good. The storm raged for 4 days. Outside, the wind screamed and the snow piled up past the windows. Inside, the cabin felt smaller by the hour. Lena threw herself into tasks, mending torn jackets, organizing supplies, scrubbing every surface until her hands were raw. Anything to stay busy. Ronan worked on bigger projects. He built a new shelf, repaired a broken chair, carved pieces for a set of snowshoes. They still didn't talk much. But on the third night, something shifted. Lena was sitting at the table trying to sew a patch onto a jacket and failing miserably. The thread kept tangling, and she'd already pricked her finger twice. She swore under her breath. From across the room, Ronan glanced over. "You're doing it wrong. I know that. Here." He stood, walked over, and took the jacket from her hands. He threaded the needle properly, showed her the stitch, then handed it back. "Try again." Lena followed his example. This time, the thread held. "Better," he said. It wasn't much, but it was the first time he'd helped her without being asked. That night, after they'd eaten and cleaned up, Ronan sat by the fire and pulled out a worn paperback, some old Western novel with a cracked spine. Lena, sitting at the table, watched him for a moment. "You read a lot?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Sometimes." "What else do you do? For fun, I mean. This isn't a vacation, Lena." "I know, but you have to do something when you're not working." He turned a page. "I think." "About what?" "Stuff that's none of your business." She should have let it go, but something in her, boredom, frustration, maybe just loneliness, pushed her to keep talking. "The woman who told me about you said you used to be different, that you didn't start out like this." Ronan's eyes lifted from the book, sharp and cold. "What else did she say?" "Nothing, just that." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he closed the book and stood. "I'm going to bed." He climbed the ladder to the loft, his side opposite hers, and disappeared. Lena sat alone by the dying fire, kicking herself. She'd pushed too hard. Crossed a line she didn't even know was there. But part of her didn't regret it, because for just a second she'd seen something in his eyes, something that wasn't cold or distant, something human. When the storm finally broke, the world outside was unrecognizable. Snow had buried the cabin halfway up the walls. Drifts towered higher than Lena's head. The sky was a pale, fragile blue, and the silence was absolute. Ronan opened the door and stared out at the white wasteland. "We need to dig out," he said, "starting with the shed. If the roof collapses, we lose half our supplies." They worked for hours, shoveling snow, reinforcing supports, clearing paths. Lena's shoulders burned, her lungs ached, but she kept going. By midday, they'd cleared enough to reach the shed and the woodpile. Ronan inspected the shed roof, then nodded. "It'll hold." Lena leaned on her shovel, breathing hard. "How much longer does winter last up here? We're not even halfway through." Her heart sank. "You're kidding." "I don't kid." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You having second thoughts?" "No." "You sure? Because if you want to leave, now's the time, before it gets worse." Lena straightened, meeting his eyes. "I'm not leaving." He studied her like he was trying to see inside her head. Then he shrugged. "Your choice." He turned and walked back toward the cabin. Lena stood there, shovel in hand, staring after him. 7 women had left this mountain. But she wasn't going to be the 8th. Unshuts. A month in, something changed. Lena couldn't pinpoint when exactly, but one morning she woke up and realized she wasn't sore anymore. Her hands had toughened, her body had adapted. The work was still hard, but it didn't break her. And Ronan noticed. He didn't say anything outright, but she caught him watching her sometimes, the faintest hint of something like respect in his eyes. He started trusting her with more, let her take the traps alone, showed her how to skin a rabbit, how to tell good wood from bad, how to read the weather by the way the trees swayed. They still didn't talk much, but the silence felt different now, less hostile, more comfortable. One evening, after a long day of clearing snow from the roof, they sat by the fire drinking coffee. Ronan stared into the flames, his face shadowed. "You're tougher than the others," he said quietly. Lena glanced at him. "You've said that before." "Because it's true." He paused. Most people come up here thinking they want this peace, quiet, escape, but they don't understand what it costs. What does it cost? Everything. His voice was flat. Your comfort, your certainty, the version of yourself you think you are. Up here, you strip all that away, and what's left is either strong enough to survive, or it breaks. Lena watched the firelight flicker across his face. Is that what happened to you? He looked at her, eyes hard. I didn't break. Then what? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he stood, set down his cup, and walked to the door. I'm checking the traps. He left. Lena sat by the fire, alone again, but this time she understood. Ronan hadn't broken. He just stopped letting anyone in. Oh God. 6 weeks after Lena arrived, the worst storm yet rolled in. It started as snow, heavy, relentless, but by nightfall it had turned into a full whiteout. Wind screamed around the cabin, shaking the walls, tearing at the roof. Ronan bolted the door and shuttered the windows. Stay inside, don't open anything. Lena nodded, heart pounding. The storm lasted 2 days. On the second night, something hit the cabin, hard. The whole structure shuddered. Lena jumped, and Ronan was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. What was that? Lena asked. Tree branch, maybe a whole tree. He peered through a crack in the shutter. Can't see anything. Another impact. This one louder. The cabin groaned. Ronan swore under his breath. If the roof goes, we're in trouble. What do we do? Hope it holds. They sat in tense silence, listening to the storm rage. At some point, Lena must have dozed off, because she woke to Ronan shaking her shoulder. Get up. We need to move supplies. The wind had torn part of the roof loose. Snow was pouring in through a gap near the chimney. Together they hauled everything away from the leak. Blankets, food stores, tools. Ronan climbed up into the loft and wedged a tarp over the hole from the inside, securing it with rope and nails. It wasn't perfect, but it stopped the worst of it. By the time they finished, both of them were soaked and shaking. Ronan built up the fire while Lena changed into dry clothes. When she came back down, he handed her a blanket. Sit close to the stove. You need to warm up. She did. They sat side by side in silence, listening to the storm. After a while, Ronan spoke. You didn't panic. Lena glanced at him. Would it have helped? No, but most people would have anyway. I'm not most people. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. No, he said quietly. You're not. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Lena pulled the blanket tighter and stared into the fire. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't feel alone. When the storm finally ended, Ronan went outside to assess the damage. Lena followed. A massive pine had fallen 20 feet from the cabin, its trunk splintered and bare. Branches were scattered everywhere. The shed had lost part of its roof. Ronan stood in the middle of it all, hands on his hips, surveying the wreckage. Could have been worse, he said. Lena laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. How? Tree could have hit the cabin. Then we'd be dead. Well, when you put it that way. He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw the ghost of a smile. It was gone almost instantly, but it had been there. They spent the next week repairing the damage, working together, not just side by side, but as a team. And somewhere in that week, something shifted. Ronan started talking more. Not a lot, but enough. He told her about the mountain, about the animals, the weather patterns, the way the land changed with the seasons. He asked her questions too, small ones, where she'd grown up, what kind of work she'd done before. Lena answered carefully, keeping the details vague. She wasn't ready to tell him everything, but she told him enough, and he didn't push. One night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Ronan handed her a cup of something that smelled like pine and alcohol. What is this? Lena asked. Homemade whiskey. It's terrible, but it's warm. She took a sip and immediately regretted it. Her throat burned. Her eyes watered. Ronan actually laughed, a low, rusty sound. Told you. Lena coughed, wiping her eyes. That's awful. Yeah. He took a sip from his own cup, wincing. But it does the job. They sat in silence for a while, nursing their drinks. Then Lena said, Why do you live up here? Ronan stared into the fire. Because down there doesn't work for me. Why not? He hesitated. Then, I tried. For a long time I tried. Had a job, a house, people I thought were friends. But it was all noise, expectations, everyone wanting something from me. I couldn't breathe. So you left. So I left. He took another sip. Up here, there's no noise, no expectations, just me and the mountain. Doesn't it get lonely? Sometimes. He glanced at her. But lonely's better than fake. Lena understood that more than he knew. What about you? Ronan asked. Why'd you come here? She'd known the question was coming, but she still wasn't ready to answer. Same reason as you, she said finally. Down there didn't work. He nodded slowly, like he knew she wasn't telling the whole truth, but also like he wasn't going to push. Fair enough. They finished their drinks in silence, and for the first time, Lena felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Not just the mountain, but everything that came before it. The next morning, Lena woke to find Ronan already gone. She climbed down from the loft, pulled on her boots, and stepped outside. The air was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that made her lungs ache. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering the scars from the storm. She found him near the tree line, crouched low, examining tracks in the snow. What is it? She asked, approaching carefully. Elk. Big one. Came through maybe an hour ago. He stood, brushing snow from his gloves. If we're lucky, it's still close. You want to hunt it? We need the meat. What we've got won't last another month. He glanced at her. You ever shoot? A gun? No. He pulled a rifle from where it was propped against a tree. Then you're about to learn. They followed the tracks for over an hour, moving quietly through the forest. Ronan led, reading the signs, broken branches, disturbed snow, droppings that steamed in the cold air. Lena stayed close, trying to step where he stepped, keeping her breathing steady. Finally, Ronan raised a hand. Stop. Lena froze. He pointed ahead through a gap in the trees. There, maybe 60 yards out, a massive elk stood in a clearing, its breath rising in clouds. Its antlers were wide, scarred from fights. It was feeding on bark, unaware of them. Ronan unslung the rifle and handed it to her. Lena stared at him. What? You shoot it. I told you, I've never... And you're going to learn right now. His voice was low, calm. You want to survive up here, you need to know how to do this. I won't always be around. That last part hung in the air like a warning. Lena took the rifle. It was heavier than she expected, cold even through her gloves. Ronan moved behind her, adjusting her grip, positioning the stock against her shoulder. Breathe slow, find the target. When you're ready, squeeze, don't pull. What if I miss? Then we go hungry. He stepped back. Take your time. Lena looked through the scope. The elk filled her vision. Muscle, fur, life. Her hands were shaking. I can't do this, she whispered. You can. Ronan's voice was steady. It's just a choice. Make it. Lena closed her eyes for a second, steadied her breathing, then opened them again. She found the elk in the scope, aimed for the chest like Ronan had shown her, and squeezed. The rifle kicked hard, slamming into her shoulder. The shot cracked across the clearing, echoing off the mountains. The elk staggered, took 2 steps, then collapsed. Lena lowered the rifle, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Good, Ronan said quietly. He took the rifle from her hands. Come on. They walked to where the elk had fallen. It was still now, eyes open and empty. Blood stained the snow beneath it. Lena felt something twist in her stomach, not regret exactly, but weight. Ronan knelt beside the animal, running a hand along its flank. Clean shot. It didn't suffer. Does that make it easier? He looked up at her. No, but it makes it right. They spent the next 2 hours field dressing the elk, working in silence. Ronan showed her how to make the cuts, where to separate muscle from bone, how to preserve the hide. It was brutal, bloody work, but necessary. By the time they hauled the meat back to the cabin on a makeshift sled, Lena's arms were shaking and her clothes were soaked with blood and sweat. But she'd done it. Ronan hung the meat in the shed to cure, then turned to her. Go clean up. You look like hell. Lena glanced down at herself. He wasn't wrong. She washed in cold water from the barrel outside, scrubbing the blood from her hands and face until her skin burned. When she came back inside, Ronan had coffee waiting. They sat at the table, both exhausted. You did good today, Ronan said after a while. Lena wrapped her hands around the cup. I killed something. You fed us. There's a difference. Is there? He met her eyes. Yeah, there is. Out here, death isn't cruelty. It's survival. You take what you need, you use what you take, and you respect what you kill. That's the deal. Lena thought about that. What happens when you stop respecting it? Then you become something else. His voice was quiet. Something I don't want to be. She studied him across the table. This man who barely spoke, who kept everyone at arm's length, who lived alone on a mountain because the world below had broken him somehow. And she realized she trusted him. Not because he was kind. He wasn't. But because he was honest in a way most people never were. Thank you, she said, for teaching me. Ronan nodded once, then stood and moved to the stove. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start processing the meat. Lena climbed up to the loft, exhaustion pulling at her like a tide. But as she lay down, staring at the rough wooden ceiling, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. They worked together every day, processing the elk meat, repairing gear, maintaining the cabin against the relentless cold. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was just part of the pattern. But Lena was starting to notice things. The way Ronan would glance at her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he made sure she ate enough even when supplies were tight. The way he'd started leaving small things for her. An extra blanket, a cup of coffee already poured, firewood stacked near the stove so she wouldn't have to go outside in the dark. He never said anything about it, never drew attention to it. But she noticed, and it made her wonder. One night, she decided to push. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Ronan sharpening a knife, Lena mending a torn glove. The wind howled outside, but inside it was warm. Can I ask you something? Lena said. Ronan didn't look up. Depends. Why did the others really leave? His hand stilled on the whetstone. I told you, they couldn't handle it. That's not the whole story. He set the knife down, jaw tight. What do you want me to say? The truth. For a long moment, he just stared at the fire. Then he sighed, rubbed a hand over his face, and spoke. The first woman who came up here, I thought maybe it could work. She was smart, tough. Seemed like she knew what she was getting into. But after a few weeks, she started asking me to change. Wanted me to talk more, open up, be something I wasn't. When I wouldn't, she left. He picked up the knife again, testing the edge with his thumb. The second one lasted longer, 2 months. But she got sick. Nothing serious, just a bad cold. And I couldn't make it better fast enough. She panicked, said she couldn't live somewhere without doctors, without safety nets, so she left. And the others? Same story, different reasons. One got bored, one got scared. One said I was cruel for not caring enough. His voice was flat, emotionless. They all wanted something from me I couldn't give. So yeah, they left, and I stopped trying to make them stay. Lena set down the glove. Is that why you're like this with me? Because you think I'll leave too? You will. You don't know that. I do. He looked at her now, his eyes hard. Because everyone does. And I'd rather you leave on your terms than wait around for you to blame me when it gets too hard. Lena felt anger flare in her chest. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Lena. You should know that by now. She stood up, fists clenched. You want to know why I came up here? Why I walked 7 miles through a blizzard to stay with a man who treats me like I'm already gone? Ronan stood too, his expression unreadable. Yeah, I do. Because I was running. From people who wanted to hurt me. From a life I couldn't survive anymore. I came here because I had no other choice, and because I thought maybe, just maybe, I could find something real in a place where nothing was fake. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. So don't tell me I'm going to leave. Don't assume you know what I can or can't handle. You don't get to decide that for me. Ronan stared at her, something shifting in his expression, surprise maybe, or something deeper. Who was trying to hurt you? He asked quietly. Lena's breath caught. She hadn't meant to say that much. It doesn't matter. It does. No, it doesn't. Because I'm here now, and whoever they were, they're not. Ronan stepped closer. Are you safe? The question hit her harder than she expected, because no one had asked her that in so long. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'm safer than I was. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Okay? You want to stay, you stay. But don't expect me to pretend this is something it's not. What is it then? Survival, same as always. Lena felt something crack inside her. Disappointment maybe, or just exhaustion from fighting so hard to be seen. Fine, she said. Survival. Got it. She turned and climbed up to the loft, leaving Ronan standing alone by the fire. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the wind, replaying the conversation over and over. He was protecting himself. She understood that. But it still hurt. Because somewhere along the way, between the work and the silence and the shared moments of near disaster, she'd started to care. Not just about surviving, about him. And that terrified her more than anything the mountain could throw at her. The next morning, things were strained. Ronan was colder than usual, his instructions clipped and distant. Lena matched his energy, keeping her responses short, her face neutral. They worked side by side, but the connection from before was gone. It stayed that way for 3 days. On the 4th day, a storm rolled in, not as violent as the last one, but steady and unrelenting. They were stuck inside again. Lena tried to stay busy, but there was only so much to do. By the 2nd day, the tension in the cabin was suffocating. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Are we going to talk about this? She said. Ronan was at the table, sketching something in a worn notebook. He didn't look up. About what? You know what. There's nothing to talk about. Lena slammed her hand on the table. The notebook jumped. Ronan looked up, startled. Stop doing that, she said. Stop shutting me out every time something gets real. I'm not shutting you out. Yes, you are. You've been doing it since I got here. And I'm tired of it. He closed the notebook slowly. What do you want from me, Lena? I want you to stop treating me like I'm temporary. You are temporary. Then make me not. The words hung in the air between them. Ronan's expression shifted, something raw and uncertain breaking through the walls he kept so carefully maintained. I don't know how, he said quietly. Lena's anger drained away, replaced by something softer. She sat down across from him. Then let me help you figure it out. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was rough, hesitant, like he'd forgotten how to do this, but he held on. I'm not good at this, he said. I know. I'll mess it up. Probably. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're not making this easier. I'm not trying to. He looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. The last person I let in, he said slowly. She left me in pieces. Took everything I had and walked away like it meant nothing. I swore I'd never do that again. I'm not her. I know, but I don't know how to trust that yet. Lena squeezed his hand. Then we take it slow, one day at a time. No promises, no expectations, just this. Ronan met her eyes. Just this. Yeah. He nodded, and some of the tension in his shoulders eased. They sat there in silence, hands still clasped, while the storm raged outside. And for the first time, the silence felt like a beginning. When the storm cleared, something had shifted between them. It wasn't dramatic. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. But Ronan started talking more. About small things, memories from before the mountain, stories about the land, thoughts he'd kept locked away for years. Lena listened, and slowly she started sharing too. Not everything. She still wasn't ready to tell him the whole truth about why she'd run, about the man she'd fled from, about the fear that still woke her in the middle of the night. But she told him enough, about the city she'd left behind, the job she'd hated, the friends who'd turned out to be strangers, about the loneliness that had followed her everywhere, even in crowded rooms. Ronan understood that better than anyone. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he asked, Do you miss it? Down there? Lena thought about it. Sometimes I miss hot showers, real coffee, movies. That's it? Mostly. She paused. What about you? Do you ever think about going back? No. Never? There's nothing for me there. He stared into the flames. Up here, I know what I'm dealing with. Cold, hunger, isolation. Those are honest threats. Down there, it's all hidden. People smile while they stab you in the back. I'll take the mountain any day. Even if it means being alone? He glanced at her. I'm not alone right now. Something in his voice made her chest tighten. No, she said softly. You're not. Later that night, as Lena climbed up to the loft, she heard Ronan's voice from below. Lena? She looked down. He was standing at the base of the ladder, looking up at her. Yeah? I'm glad you stayed. It was the closest thing to vulnerable she'd ever heard from him. She smiled. Me too. The winter deepened. But now, instead of feeling like a prison, the cabin felt like a refuge. They fell into routines that weren't just about survival. They were about living. Ronan taught her to carve wood, and she made him laugh when her first attempt looked more like a deformed potato than a spoon. She taught him a card game her grandmother had shown her, and he accused her of cheating when she won 3 times in a row. They cooked together, argued over stupid things, sat in comfortable silence, and slowly, carefully, they started to let their guards down. One night, Lena woke to the sound of Ronan moving around below. She climbed down and found him sitting at the table, head in his hands. You okay? She asked. He looked up, his face tight. Bad dream. Want to talk about it? Not really. She sat down across from him. That's fine, but I'm not going back to sleep until you do. He almost smiled. You're stubborn. So I've been told. He sighed, rubbed his eyes, then spoke. I dreamed you left. Woke up and you were just gone. And I was alone again. Lena reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. I know, but I can promise I'll try. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. That's enough. They sat there until the fire burned low and the fear faded, hands still joined across the table. And when Ronan finally went back to sleep, Lena stayed awake a little longer, watching the embers glow. She'd spent so long running from her past that she'd forgotten what it felt like to move towards something. But now, sitting in this cabin on the edge of the world with a man who was slowly learning to trust again, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The mountain was still brutal. The cold still bit. The work still never ended. But for the first time, Lena wasn't just surviving. She was building something. And so was Ronan. Together, they were becoming more than 2 broken people hiding from the world. They were becoming a team, a partnership, maybe even something more. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it, in the way Ronan made sure she had the warmest blanket, in the way Lena saved him the last of the coffee, in the small touches, hands brushing as they worked, shoulders leaning together by the fire, glances that lasted just a beat too long. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was real, and for now, that was enough. The morning Lena found the tracks, she knew something had changed. She'd gone out early to check the traps, moving through the pre-dawn darkness with a lantern in one hand and the rifle slung over her shoulder. The snow crunched under her boots, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. She was halfway to the first trap when she saw them. Paw prints. Massive ones. Pressed deep into the snow, each track the size of her hand spread wide. Her breath caught. She crouched down, holding the lantern closer. The prints were fresh, maybe an hour old, judging by how clean the edges were. They came from the north, circled around toward the cabin, then veered off toward the creek. Bear. A big one. Lena stood slowly, her heart hammering. She scanned the trees, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow, every sound. Nothing moved. She backed toward the cabin, keeping the rifle ready, eyes on the forest. When she pushed through the door, Ronan was already up, pouring coffee at the stove. He took one look at her face and set the pot down. What happened? Bear tracks. Fresh. Maybe 50 yards from the cabin. His expression went hard. Show me. They went out together, Ronan carrying his rifle and a larger lantern. He knelt where Lena had found the prints, studying them in silence. After a moment, he stood. Male, full grown, probably 900 pounds. Is that normal this time of year? No. His jaw was tight. He should be hibernating. If he's out, it means he's starving. Didn't put on enough fat before winter, or something woke him up too early. What does that mean for us? Ronan followed the tracks with his eyes, tracing their path around the cabin. It means he's desperate, and desperate animals are dangerous. So what do? We stay alert. Keep the rifle close. Don't go out alone. He looked at her. And if you see him, you don't run. You make yourself big, make noise, and you shoot if he charges. Lena's stomach twisted. You think he'll come back? Yeah, I do. They spent the rest of the day reinforcing the cabin, checking the doors and windows, moving supplies inside from the shed, making sure nothing edible was left outside. Ronan set up a perimeter of bells on tripwires around the clearing, primitive but effective. That night, they ate dinner in tense silence. Lena pushed food around her plate, her appetite gone. Have you dealt with this before? Once, a few years ago. Different bear, same situation. Ronan's voice was flat. It stalked the cabin for 3 days before I had to kill it. You killed it? Didn't have a choice. It tried to break in through the window. He met her eyes. If this one does the same, we won't hesitate. Understood? Lena nodded, throat tight. After dinner, Ronan loaded extra ammunition and set both rifles within easy reach. They sat by the fire, neither of them speaking, both listening to the night. Around midnight, the bells rang. Lena's head snapped up. Ronan was already moving, grabbing his rifle and crossing to the window. He peered through a crack in the shutter. You see anything? Lena whispered. Not yet. They waited, barely breathing. Then, a sound, low and guttural. Something moving through the trees. Ronan's grip tightened on the rifle. Stay back from the door. Lena grabbed the second rifle, her hand shaking. She'd never been more aware of how fragile the cabin was. Just wood and nails between them, and something that could tear through it like paper. The sound came again, closer now, then silence. Ronan didn't move, didn't lower the rifle. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, he stepped back from the window. It's gone. For now. Lena exhaled, her whole body trembling. What do? We take turns keeping watch. You sleep first. I'll wake you in a few hours. I don't think I can sleep. Try anyway. You'll need the rest. Lena climbed up to the loft, but she didn't sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Ronan move around below, the creak of the floorboards, the crackle of the fire. Every sound outside made her flinch. When Ronan finally called her down to take over the watch, she was almost relieved to have something to do. She sat by the window with the rifle across her lap, watching the darkness, while Ronan stretched out on the floor near the stove. Wake me if anything happens, he said. I will. He closed his eyes, but Lena could tell he wasn't really sleeping, just resting, ready to move at the first sign of trouble. The hours dragged. Lena's eyes burned. Her muscles ached from holding still. But she didn't let her guard down. Because out there, somewhere in the dark, something was waiting. The bear came back the next night. This time, they both heard it. Heavy footsteps crunching through snow, circling the cabin. The bells rang twice, then went silent. Ronan stood at the window, tracking the sound. Lena was beside him, rifle ready, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. There, Ronan whispered, pointing. Lena followed his gaze and saw it. A massive shadow moving between the trees just at the edge of the lantern light. The bear stopped, turned toward the cabin. Even from this distance, Lena could see how big it was. Shoulders like boulders, a head the size of a barrel. It took a step forward. Ronan raised his rifle, sighting through the window. If it charges, I'll shoot. Be ready to back me up. Lena's hands were slick with sweat despite the cold. Okay. The bear took another step. Then another. It was testing them, seeing how close it could get. Ronan fired a warning shot into the air. The crack echoed like thunder. The bear reared back, startled, then turned and bolted into the trees. Ronan lowered the rifle, breathing hard. That bought us some time, but it'll be back. How do you know? Because it's starving, and we're the easiest food around. Lena felt ice settle in her stomach. So what do? Ronan turned to her, his face grim. We hunt it, before it hunts us. The idea was insane. Lena knew that the moment he said it, but Ronan was right. Waiting in the cabin, hoping the bear would lose interest, wasn't a plan. It was a prayer, and prayers didn't stop 900 pounds of desperate predator. "You're serious," Lena said. "Dead serious." He started gathering gear, rope, knives, extra ammunition. "If we track it now, while it's still wary, we have the advantage. We wait, and it gets bolder. Eventually, it'll break in, and then we're trapped. Or we could just leave. Go down the mountain until it's safe." Ronan stopped, looked at her. "You want to hike 7 miles through waist-deep snow with a starving bear on our trail? Because that's what'll happen. It'll follow us. And out in the open, we're even more vulnerable." Lena hated that he was right. "So we kill it," she said quietly. "We kill it." They left at first light. Ronan led, moving fast but careful, rifle ready. Lena followed close, scanning the trees, every nerve on fire. The tracks were easy to follow. The bear hadn't bothered to hide its path. It had circled the cabin twice more after Ronan's warning shot, then headed northeast toward a cluster of rocky outcroppings. They tracked it for 2 hours, the cold seeping through their clothes, their breath coming in ragged clouds. Finally, Ronan stopped and held up a hand. "What?" Lena whispered. He pointed ahead. There, maybe 30 yards out, the bear was digging at the base of a fallen tree, trying to find insects or roots, anything to eat. It hadn't seen them yet. Ronan motioned for Lena to get into position. She moved to his right, crouching behind a thick pine, rifle raised. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still. Ronan sighted down his barrel, waiting for a clear shot. The bear shifted, and for just a second its shoulder was exposed. Ronan fired. The shot cracked through the forest. The bear roared, a sound that tore through Lena like a blade, and spun toward them. It wasn't down. Ronan fired again, hit it in the chest. The bear stumbled but kept coming. "Shoot!" Ronan yelled. Lena squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. She didn't know if she hit it. The bear was charging now, closing the distance impossibly fast. Ronan fired a third time. The bear's front legs gave out, but momentum carried it forward, plowing through the snow. It stopped 10 feet from them, breath rattling, blood staining the white ground. Then it went still. Lena lowered her rifle, her whole body shaking. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Ronan approached the bear slowly, rifle still raised, ready for it to move. It didn't. He nudged it with his boot. Nothing. "It's dead," he said quietly. Lena sank to her knees, the rifle falling from her hands. The adrenaline drained out of her all at once, leaving her hollow. Ronan came over, crouched beside her. "You okay?" She nodded, but her teeth were chattering. "That was the scariest thing I've ever done," she managed. "Yeah." He put a hand on her shoulder. "But you didn't freeze, you did what needed doing." "I don't even know if I hit it." "Doesn't matter, you were there. That's what counts." They sat in the snow for a few minutes, catching their breath, letting the reality settle. Then Ronan stood. "We need to move it before scavengers show up. And we need to salvage what we can." Processing the bear took the rest of the day. It was brutal, exhausting work, even harder than the elk. But Ronan was methodical, showing Lena how to separate hide from muscle, how to preserve the fat, how to make use of every part. By the time they hauled the last of the meat back to the cabin, the sun was setting and both of them were covered in blood and exhausted beyond words. Ronan hung the meat in the shed, then turned to Lena. "Go inside. I'll clean up out here." "I can help." "You've done enough." His voice was softer than usual. "Go." Lena didn't argue. She stumbled inside, peeled off her filthy clothes, and washed in freezing water until her skin was numb. When Ronan came in an hour later, she'd already started a fire and put coffee on. He washed up in silence, then sat down at the table across from her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Ronan said, "I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd stayed behind." Lena looked up. "I wasn't going to let you go alone." "Why not?" She thought about it. "Because you wouldn't have let me go alone either." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. "No," he said quietly. "I wouldn't have." They held each other's gaze across the table. Then Ronan reached over and took her hand. It wasn't dramatic. wasn't romantic. It was just connection, acknowledgement. They'd faced death together, and they'd come out the other side. That night, after they'd eaten and the fire had burned low, Lena climbed up to the loft. But before she did, she stopped at the base of the ladder and looked back at Ronan. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me out there." He met her eyes. "Thank you for not running." She smiled. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." This time, he smiled back. Just a little. But it was real. I'm starting to believe that. The days after the bear hunt felt different. There was a new ease between them, like a wall had come down, one neither of them had realized was there. Ronan talked more. Not a lot, but enough. He told her about his childhood, growing up in a small town he'd hated, working construction jobs he'd despised. He talked about the decision to leave it all behind, to come up here and build something that was just his. Lena listened, and slowly she started sharing more too. She told him about her mother, who'd died when she was 16. About the years she'd spent drifting, trying to find a place that felt like home. About the relationship that had turned dark, the man who'd become obsessed, the night she'd realized she had to run or she wouldn't survive. She didn't tell him everything. She still couldn't, but she told him enough. And Ronan didn't push. He just listened, his face unreadable, his hand steady on hers across the table. "He ever find you?" Ronan asked when she finished. "I don't think so. I was careful. Changed my name, paid cash for everything, didn't leave a trail." She paused. "But I don't know for sure." "If he does," Ronan said, his voice cold and flat, "he won't make it off this mountain." Lena looked at him. There was no bravado in his tone, just fact. "You mean that?" she said. "Yeah, I do." Something warm unfurled in her chest, not because she wanted violence, but because someone finally, actually, had her back. "Thank you," she whispered. Ronan squeezed her hand. "You're safe here, Lena. I'll make sure of it." And she believed him. That night, something shifted again. They were sitting by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched. Ronan had been whittling a piece of wood, and Lena had been reading one of his old books. But at some point, she'd stopped reading, and he'd stopped carving. They were just sitting, together. Lena set the book down and looked at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah. Do you ever get lonely? Even now?" Ronan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I used to, before you came." He turned to her. "I don't anymore." Her breath caught. "Ronan." He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was hesitant, careful, like he was afraid she might pull away. She didn't. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. "I don't know how to be with someone. Not anymore. Neither do I. But I want to try. With you." Lena's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to just survive here. I want you to stay, really stay. Not because you have to, because you want to." She looked into his eyes, those gray-blue eyes that had been so cold when she first arrived, but were warm now, open in a way she'd never seen. "I do want to," she said. "I've wanted to for a while now." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't. When his lips met hers, it was tentative at first, uncertain, testing. But then Lena leaned into him, and the kiss deepened, months of tension and unspoken words pouring into it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Ronan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm scared I'll mess this up." "Then we'll mess it up together." He laughed, a real genuine laugh. "That's a terrible plan. It's the only one we've got." That night, Lena didn't sleep in the loft. She stayed beside Ronan near the fire, wrapped in blankets, his arm around her shoulders. And for the first time since she'd arrived on the mountain, she felt something more than safe. She felt home. The next few weeks were a blur of work and stolen moments. They fell into a new rhythm, one built not just on survival, but on partnership, on choice. Ronan still had his rough edges. He still went quiet sometimes, retreating into himself when things got too intense. But he came back, every time. And Lena learned to give him space when he needed it, trusting that he'd return. They worked side by side, building and repairing and planning. They talked about the future, carefully, tentatively, but they talked. About expanding the cabin, about putting in a garden when spring came, about what it would take to make this place not just livable, but sustainable for the long term. And at night, they sat by the fire, Ronan's hand in hers, and let themselves imagine a life that was more than just getting through another winter. One evening, as they were cooking dinner, Lena said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About staying, permanently." Ronan looked up from the pot he was stirring. "You mean that?" "Yeah, I do." She met his eyes. "I'm not running anymore, Ronan. I'm done with that. This is where I want to be." Something broke open in his expression. Relief, joy, hope, all tangled together. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I was afraid to ask," he said into her hair. "Afraid if I pushed, you'd leave." "I'm not leaving. Not unless you want me to." "I don't. I really don't." They stood there, wrapped around each other, the fire crackling behind them. And Lena knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she'd made the right choice. This mountain, this man, this life. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and she was going to fight like hell to keep it. Spring came slowly to the mountain. The snow didn't melt all at once. It retreated in stages, revealing brown earth and dead grass, patches of mud that turned the clearing into a swamp. The creek swelled with runoff, roaring loud enough to hear from inside the cabin. Ice broke from the roof in dangerous sheets that crashed to the ground without warning. Lena stood in the doorway one morning, watching water drip from the eaves, and felt something she hadn't expected. Anxiety. Winter had been hard, brutal even, but it had also been simple. Survive the cold, find food, keep the fire going. The rules were clear. Now, with the seasons changing, everything felt uncertain again. Ronan came up behind her, carrying an armful of firewood. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" She turned to him. "About what comes next." He set the wood down by the stove, brushed bark from his hands. "We start building. The garden, the addition to the cabin, maybe a proper smokehouse. There's a lot to do before next winter." "That's not what I mean." Ronan studied her face. "Then what do you mean?" Lena hesitated. She'd been trying to find the words for days, but they still felt too big, too fragile to speak out loud. "I mean us," she said finally. "We've made it through winter, but that doesn't mean we'll make it through everything else." His expression shifted. Not anger, but something close to hurt. "You having doubts?" "No. Not about wanting to be here, but," she struggled to explain, "we've been surviving together. That's different from living together, and I don't know if we know how to do that yet." Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down heavily. "Come here," he said. Lena sat across from him. He stared at his hands, rough and scarred from years of hard work. "I've been thinking the same thing," he admitted. "Winter was easy in a way. We had a common enemy. Now that it's gone, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I keep waiting for you to realize you made a mistake, that this life isn't what you thought it would be, that I'm not what you thought I'd be." He looked up at her. "And I'm scared that when you do, you'll leave." Lena's chest tightened. "I'm not going to leave." "You don't know that. Not really." "Yes, I do." She reached across the table, took his hands in hers. "Ronan, I'm not the others. I didn't come here looking for some fantasy. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. And I stayed because I chose to. That hasn't changed. But what if it does? Then we deal with it, together." She squeezed his hands. "You can't keep waiting for me to fail. It's not fair to either of us." He held her gaze, something vulnerable breaking through. "I don't know how to stop." "Then let me help you." She stood, moved around the table, and sat beside him. "We're going to mess up, both of us. We're going to fight and say things we don't mean and drive each other crazy. But that doesn't mean we quit." Ronan turned to her. "What if I'm not enough? What if you need more than I can give? What if you are enough? What if this is exactly what I need?" He searched her face like he was looking for proof. Then he pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers. I want to believe that, he said quietly. Then believe it. They sat like that for a long time, the morning light spilling through the windows, the sound of the swollen creek filling the silence. And slowly the anxiety in Lena's chest began to ease. They weren't perfect. They were messy and uncertain and still figuring things out. But they were trying, and that was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of work. Ronan drew up plans for expanding the cabin, adding a second room, raising the roof to create more storage space, building a proper porch. Lena threw herself into preparing the garden plot, clearing rocks and dead brush, turning the soil until her back screamed. It was hard, relentless labor, but it felt different from winter's grind. This wasn't just survival. This was building something that would last. One afternoon, as they were digging post holes for the new porch, Lena stopped to wipe sweat from her face. The sun was warm, actually warm, not just less cold, and she'd stripped down to a thin shirt. Ronan glanced over at her. You need a break? No, I'm good. She paused. But I've been thinking about something. What's that? Supplies. We're running low on a lot of things. Salt, flour, nails, medical stuff. If we're going to expand, we need more. Ronan leaned on his shovel. I know. I've been putting it off. Why? Because it means leaving, going down to Timber Falls, loading up, coming back, 3 days minimum, maybe more if the roads are bad. Lena's stomach dropped. You'd have to go alone. Yeah. The thought of Ronan leaving, of being here by herself for days, sent a spike of fear through her. Not because she couldn't handle it, but because she didn't want to. When were you planning to go? She asked. Soon, before the real work starts. He studied her. You'll be okay here. I'll leave you both rifles, plenty of food. You know how to handle yourself now. I know, it's just… What? She met his eyes. I don't want you to go. Something softened in his expression. He set down the shovel and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. I don't want to either. But we don't have a choice. Lena pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the smell of sweat and sawdust and him. What if something happens? What if you get hurt, or the truck breaks down, or… Hey! He tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. I've made this trip 100 times. I'll be fine. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll come back. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, cold and stubborn. Ronan must have seen it in her face because he said, You trust me? Yes? Then trust that I know what I'm doing. Lena took a shaky breath, then nodded. Okay? Okay? He kissed her forehead, then stepped back. I'll leave in 2 days. That gives us time to go over everything. What to do if there's trouble, how to ration supplies, where the emergency gear is. 2 days, Lena repeated. It felt like nowhere near enough time. They spent those 2 days preparing obsessively. Ronan showed her where he kept the extra ammunition, the backup medical kit, the emergency flares he'd bought years ago and never used. He walked her through every possible scenario, what to do if the weather turned bad, if an animal came around, if she got injured. He wrote everything down in his rough handwriting, even though Lena told him she didn't need a list. Humor me, he'd said, and she had. The night before he left, they barely slept. They lay together in the darkness, hands clasped, neither one willing to let go. I'm going to worry the whole time you're gone, Lena admitted. I know. I'll worry about you too. What if something happens to me while you're away? Then I'll never forgive myself. He turned to face her. But you're strong, Lena. Stronger than you think. You'll be fine. How do you know? Because you've survived everything else. This is just a few days. She wanted to believe that, but fear had a way of making everything seem impossible. Tell me about when you get back, she said. What we'll do. Ronan thought about it. We'll unload the supplies. You'll probably complain that I bought the wrong kind of flour or forgot something important. I don't complain that much. You do, but I like it. He smiled in the darkness. Then we'll make dinner together. Something good, with the fresh ingredients I'll bring back. And we'll sit on the porch and watch the sunset, and you'll tell me everything that happened while I was gone. That sounds nice. It will be. I promise. They fell silent again, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on them. Finally, Lena said, I love you. Ronan's breath caught. They'd been dancing around those words for weeks, maybe months, but neither had said them out loud. Until now. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I thought I could love anyone. They kissed then, slow and deep, trying to memorize the feeling. When they finally pulled apart, Ronan said, I'm coming back, no matter what. Believe that. I do. But as sleep finally claimed them, Lena sent a silent prayer into the universe that he was right. Ronan left at dawn. Lena stood in the clearing, arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill, and watched him load the truck, an old pickup he kept stashed a mile down the mountain, covered with a tarp and hidden from casual view. He'd hiked down the night before to make sure it would start. It had barely, the engine coughing and sputtering before catching. Now he was checking the supplies one last time. Empty containers for hauling back food and materials, a detailed list of what they needed, cash he kept buried in a metal box under the cabin's floorboards. When he was done, he walked back to where Lena stood. You remember everything we talked about? He asked. Yes. Rifle stays with you at all times. You hear anything strange, you lock yourself in and wait it out. You don't take risks. I know, Ronan. And if something happens, nothing's going to happen. He cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious. I mean it, Lena. If something goes wrong, you use the flares. Someone will see them. Someone will come. Okay. He kissed her then, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the taste of her lips, the feel of her in his arms. When he pulled back, he said, I'll be back in 3 days, 4 at most. I'll be here? I know you will. He touched her cheek one more time, then forced himself to step away. I have to go before I change my mind. Then go, before I make you stay. He climbed into the truck, started the engine. It roared to life, loud in the quiet morning. Lena stepped back as he pulled away, watching until the truck disappeared around the bend and the sound of the engine faded completely. Then she was alone. The silence that followed was absolute. Lena stood in the clearing for a long time, staring at the spot where the truck had been, feeling the weight of solitude settle over her like a heavy blanket. Finally, she turned and walked back to the cabin. The first day wasn't bad. Lena kept busy, checking traps, hauling water, working on the garden plot. She fell into the rhythms Ronan had taught her, moving through tasks with practiced efficiency. The weather was good, warm and clear. She worked until her muscles ached, then made herself a simple dinner and ate at the table, alone. The space across from her felt impossibly empty. She kept looking up, expecting to see Ronan there, only to remember he was gone. After dinner, she tried reading one of his old westerns, but couldn't focus. The words blurred together, meaningless. She gave up and went to bed early, the rifle propped beside her, listening to the night sounds of the mountain. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless, broken by dreams of truck crashes and broken bones and Ronan calling for help she couldn't give. The second day was harder. She woke to rain, cold, relentless, turning the clearing into a sea of mud. She couldn't work outside, so she stayed in the cabin, mending gear and organizing supplies and trying not to think about where Ronan was or what he was doing. The hours dragged. The rain drummed on the roof, monotonous and maddening. She paced the cabin, checked and rechecked the supplies, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. By evening, Lena was climbing the walls. She kept glancing at the door, half expecting Ronan to walk through it, dripping wet and complaining about the weather. He didn't. She forced herself to eat, though she had no appetite. The food tasted like cardboard. Everything felt wrong without him here. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain and trying not to spiral into worst-case scenarios. What if the truck had broken down in the middle of nowhere? What if he'd gotten hurt and couldn't get help? What if he'd been in an accident and was lying in a ditch somewhere, bleeding, calling her name? She forced the thoughts away. Ronan was fine. He'd said 3 days, maybe 4. It had only been 2. She was being paranoid, but the fear wouldn't let go. On the 3rd day, the rain stopped. Lena spent the morning working in the garden, trying to burn off the restless energy that had been building inside her. But by afternoon, she was watching the trail, waiting. Ronan had said 3 days, maybe 4. It had been 3. She told herself it was too early to worry. The roads could be slow after the rain. He might have had trouble finding everything on the list. A dozen innocent reasons why he might be delayed. But as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the shadows lengthened, fear started creeping in. By nightfall, he still wasn't back. Lena sat by the window, rifle across her lap, staring out at the darkening forest. 4 days. He'd said 4 at most. Tomorrow. He'd be back tomorrow. She repeated it like a mantra, trying to convince herself. But sleep didn't come easy that night. She dozed in fitful bursts, jerking awake at every sound, convinced she'd heard the truck. She hadn't. The 4th day dawned gray and cold. Lena woke exhausted, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. She went through the motions, made coffee, checked the traps, hauled water. But her mind was somewhere else. On the road. On the truck. On Ronan. By midday, she was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring down the trail, willing him to appear. He didn't. As the afternoon wore on, Lena's fear crystallized into something sharper. Panic. Something was wrong. She knew it in her bones. She thought about the flares, about hiking down the mountain to look for him. But Ronan had made her promise not to take unnecessary risks, and going after him alone in unfamiliar territory was the definition of unnecessary risk. So she waited, and waited. By evening, she was barely holding it together. She sat at the table, head in her hands, trying to figure out what to do. If he wasn't back by morning, she'd have to make a choice. Wait longer or go looking. Neither option felt right. Then she heard it. An engine. Distant, but unmistakable. Lena's head snapped up. She grabbed the rifle and ran outside. The sound grew louder, closer. And then, there. The truck, rumbling up the trail, headlights cutting through the dusk. Lena's knees almost gave out. Relief hit her so hard she thought she might collapse. The truck pulled into the clearing and stopped. Ronan climbed out, moving stiffly, his face drawn and exhausted. Lena ran to him. What happened? You said 3 days, maybe 4? I thought... I know, I'm sorry. He pulled her into a tight hug, holding on like she might disappear. The truck broke down halfway back. Transmission gave out. Took me a whole day to find someone who could fix it. She pulled back, searching his face. He looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, like he hadn't slept in days. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, just tired. He gestured to the truck bed, which was loaded with supplies. But I got everything, and then some. Lena wanted to yell at him for scaring her, wanted to cry from relief. Instead, she just held him. Don't do that to me again, she said into his shoulder. I'll try not to. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, feeling the fear drain away. Finally, Ronan stepped back. We should unload before it gets full dark. Okay. They worked together, hauling sacks of flour and salt, boxes of nails and screws, bundles of fabric and rope into the cabin and the shed. Medical supplies, seeds for the garden, even a few treats, coffee, sugar, a bar of chocolate, some hard candy. Ronan had gone all out. When everything was inside, he collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Lena made him food, watched him eat, then sat beside him. I was terrified, she admitted. I didn't know what to do. You did exactly what you were supposed to. You stayed safe. You waited. He took her hand. I'm proud of you. I hated every second of it. I know, but you handled it. Lena rested her head on his shoulder. I missed you. I missed you too, every damn minute. That night, they didn't talk about the trip, or the supplies, or the work ahead. They just held each other, grateful to be together again. And Lena realized something. She'd been alone on the mountain for 4 days. She'd managed. She'd survived. But survival wasn't enough anymore. She didn't just want to survive. She wanted to live with him. The weeks that followed were a blur of construction and planning. They framed out the new room, raised the walls, built the porch. Ronan worked like a man possessed, and Lena matched him stride for stride when her body allowed. But something else was happening too. Something Lena had been trying to ignore. She was tired all the time. Not just the normal exhaustion from hard work, but a bone-deep weariness that sleep didn't fix. And her cycle, which had never been regular but had at least been somewhat predictable, had stopped completely. At first, she'd chalked it up to stress, the hard physical labor, the change in diet and environment. But as the weeks passed and the exhaustion got worse, a different possibility started creeping into her mind, one she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Not yet. One evening, as they sat on the half-finished porch watching the sunset, Ronan said, "You've been quiet lately." Lena glanced at him. "Have I?" "Yeah? More than usual. Something on your mind?" She wanted to tell him, wanted to share the fear and uncertainty that had been growing inside her, but she wasn't sure yet, and saying it out loud would make it real. "Just tired," she said. "The work's been hard." Ronan studied her like he knew there was more, but he didn't push. "You should rest more, take breaks when you need them." "I'm fine." "You're not, but I know better than to argue with you." She almost smiled. "Smart man." They sat in silence, watching the light fade over the mountains, and Lena made a decision. Tomorrow she'd know for sure, one way or another. The next morning, Lena waited until Ronan left to check the traps. Then she pulled out one of the medical books he'd bought, a general health guide that covered everything from broken bones to common illnesses. She flipped to the section on pregnancy and read through the symptoms. Missed period? Check. Fatigue? Check. Tender breasts? Check. Nausea, especially in the morning. She hadn't been sick yet, but she'd been feeling queasy. Food aversions. The smell of coffee had started making her stomach turn. Frequent urination. Now that she thought about it, yes. Lena closed the book, her heart pounding. She was pregnant. She didn't need a test to know. Her body was telling her in a dozen different ways. She was pregnant, and they were living on a mountain, miles from any hospital or doctor, with winter coming in a few months. Fear crashed over her like a wave. What had they done? When Ronan came back an hour later, Lena was sitting at the table, staring at nothing. He set down the game he'd caught, 2 rabbits, and crossed to her. "You okay?" She looked up at him, and the words spilled out before she could stop them. "I think I'm pregnant." Ronan froze. "What?" "I'm late. Really late. And I've been exhausted and nauseous, and everything fits." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "I'm pregnant, Ronan." For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. His face went through a dozen expressions: shock, fear, something that might have been joy, then back to fear. Finally, he sat down heavily. "Are you sure?" "No, but pretty sure." How far along?" "I don't know. 6 weeks? Maybe 8? He stared at the floor, processing. Lena watched him, her own fear mounting with every second of silence. Finally, she said, "Say something." "I don't know what to say." "Are you angry?" "No, I'm—" He looked up at her, and she saw it in his eyes. Terror. "I'm scared, Lena. We're not ready for this." "I know. We don't have a hospital. We don't have a doctor. If something goes wrong—" "I know," she said again, her voice breaking. "Do you? Because out here, childbirth is dangerous. Women die. Babies die. And I can't—" He stood abruptly, turned away from her. "I can't lose you." Lena felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I'm scared too." "Then what do we do?" She'd been asking herself the same question all morning, and she'd come to only one conclusion. "We prepare," she said. "We learn everything we can. We get supplies. We make a plan. And we hope it's enough." Ronan turned back to her, his face anguished. "What if it's not?" "Then we deal with it when it happens. But we don't have a choice, Ronan. This is happening whether we're ready or not." He stood there for a long moment, shoulders shaking. Then he crossed to her, dropped to his knees in front of her chair, and pressed his face against her stomach. "I'm so scared," he whispered. Lena ran her fingers through his hair. "Me too." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, both terrified of what lay ahead. But when Ronan finally pulled back and looked at her, something had shifted in his expression. Determination. "Okay," he said, "we prepare, starting now." The next morning, Ronan was different. Not softer exactly, but focused in a way Lena hadn't seen before. He was up before dawn, sketching plans at the table, making lists, calculating. When Lena came down from the loft, he looked up. "We need to prepare." "For what?" "For everything." He pushed the notebook toward her. "If you're pregnant, we have maybe 7, 8 months. We need supplies, medical equipment, books on childbirth, and we need to make this place safer." Lena sat down, studying his notes. He'd written out a detailed plan. What to buy on the next trip to town, what to build, what to learn. You've been up all night, she said. Couldn't sleep. He rubbed his eyes. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And I realized something. What? I can't control whether things go wrong, but I can control how prepared we are when they do. He met her eyes. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to prepare like our lives depend on it, because they might. Lena felt a lump form in her throat. Ronan, I'm still terrified, he said quietly. I'm probably going to be terrified until the baby's here and healthy. But I'm not running. I'm staying. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you both survive this. She reached across the table and took his hand. We're going to be okay. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And I need you to believe it too. He squeezed her hand. I'll try. That's all I ask. Over the next few days, Ronan threw himself into preparation with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He made another trip to Timber Falls, this time coming back with medical supplies he'd bought from a retired nurse, sterile gauze, antiseptics, pain medication, even a blood pressure cuff. He'd also found books, a modern guide to pregnancy and childbirth, an old midwifery manual from the 1970s, a veterinary textbook that, while not ideal, had sections on emergency deliveries that might be useful. Between trips, they studied, reading the books cover to cover, quizzing each other on complications, warning signs, what to do in different scenarios. Lena learned about the stages of labor, about what was normal and what wasn't, about the dozen things that could go wrong and how to recognize them. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. Knowledge gave them control, even if that control was limited. Meanwhile, Ronan worked on the cabin. He insulated the new room more thoroughly, installed a second wood stove so it could be kept warm independently, built shelves for supplies. He reinforced the roof, checked every window seal, made sure everything was as weatherproof as possible. Lena helped when she could, but the pregnancy was taking its toll. The exhaustion came in waves now, unpredictable and overwhelming. Some days she could work for hours. Other days she could barely get out of bed. The nausea had started too. Not just in the mornings, but randomly throughout the day. The smell of certain foods made her stomach turn. Coffee, which she'd always loved, became unbearable. Ronan adjusted without complaint. He took on more of the physical work, never making her feel guilty about it. He made sure she ate, even when she didn't want to. He was patient when she snapped at him for no reason, understanding that the hormones were making everything harder. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lena said, "You're going to be a good father." Ronan looked at her, surprised. "What makes you think that?" "Because you care. You're scared, but you're still here. You're still trying." Being scared and trying doesn't make someone a good father. "Yeah, it does." She leaned against him. "My father left when I was 5. I barely remember him, and my mom's boyfriends after that. Let's just say the bar was pretty low." Ronan was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It made me who I am." She turned to look at him. "But it also means I know what bad fathers look like. And you're not one of them." "How do you know? The kid's not even born yet." "Because you're already thinking about how to keep us safe, how to be better. That's the difference." He was quiet, processing. Then he said, "I never thought I'd have kids." "Why not?" "Because I didn't think I could be what they'd need. My old man," he trailed off, jaw tight. "He wasn't around much, and when he was mean, angry at the world and taking it out on us. I swore I'd never be like that." "You're not." "How do you know?" "Because angry people don't spend their nights reading books about how to keep their partner and child safe. They don't build rooms to make sure everyone's comfortable. They don't care." She took his hand. "You care, Ronan. That's everything." He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "What if I mess up? Then we'll figure it out, together. What if something happens to you? What if I can't save you? Then you'll raise our child and teach them to be strong. Like you." Ronan's eyes filled with tears, the first time she'd seen him cry. "I can't lose you, Lena." "You won't." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay." He pulled her close, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. And in that embrace, Lena felt both his fear and his love, tangled together in a way she couldn't separate. They stayed like that until the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the stars came out, neither one willing to let go. By late summer, Lena's pregnancy was undeniable. Her stomach had started to swell, her body changing in ways that both fascinated and terrified her. She'd had to adjust her clothes, let out seams, eventually just wearing Ronan's old shirts because they were the only things that fit. The baby moved now. At first it had been flutter, so faint she thought she might be imagining it. But over the weeks, the movements became stronger, more insistent. The first time Ronan felt it, his whole face transformed. They'd been sitting by the fire, Lena resting against him, when the baby kicked hard enough to be felt from outside. Ronan's hand was on her stomach. He froze. Was that? Yeah, Lena said, smiling. That was the baby. He moved his hand carefully, waiting. The baby kicked again. Strong, he said, wonder in his voice. Like her mother. You think it's a girl? I don't know, just feels like it. Ronan kept his hand there, feeling the baby move, his expression full of awe. She's real, he said quietly. Of course she's real. I know, but feeling her makes it different. Makes it… He struggled for words. More. Lena understood. She'd been living with the pregnancy for months now, feeling every change, every symptom. But for Ronan, it had been abstract until this moment. Now it was real. Are you still scared? She asked. Terrified, but also… He looked at her. Excited, is that crazy? No, I feel the same way. They sat together, Ronan's hand on her stomach, feeling their daughter move and kick, and remind them she was coming whether they were ready or not. As autumn approached, the reality of what was coming hit them both hard. Lena was due in late November or early December, right at the start of winter. The timing couldn't have been worse. Ronan made one final trip to Timber Falls, stocking up on everything they might need. More medical supplies, food that would keep, extra firewood, blankets, everything. He also talked to the retired nurse again, asking questions, learning everything he could about childbirth complications and how to handle them. When he came back, he looked grim. What did she say? Lena asked. She said we should go to a hospital, that having a baby out here is too risky. What did you tell her? That we don't have a choice. Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, we could still go. Drive down before I'm too far along. Find a place to stay until the baby comes. Ronan looked at her sharply. Is that what you want? She thought about it, really thought about it. Going down to civilization would be safer. There'd be doctors, hospitals, help if something went wrong. But it would also mean leaving everything they'd built. Leaving the mountain. Leaving the life they'd chosen. And there was another fear too. One she hadn't voiced. The man she'd run from. He'd been looking for her in cities and towns. If she went back down, she'd be easier to find. No, she said finally. I want to stay here, with you. Even knowing the risks? Even knowing the risks. Ronan pulled her close. Okay, then we stay, and we do this together. Together, she agreed. But as the weeks passed and her due date drew closer, the fear became harder to ignore. Lena had read enough to know all the things that could go wrong. Bleeding, infection, the baby being breech or stuck, complications she couldn't even pronounce. And out here, with no hospital, no emergency services, if something went really wrong. She tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the positive. The baby was healthy, she was healthy. They'd prepared as much as they could. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, the fears crept in. One night, Ronan woke to find her crying. What's wrong? He asked, instantly alert. I'm scared, she admitted. I keep thinking about all the things that could happen, and I'm terrified that I won't be strong enough. He pulled her close. You're the strongest person I know. What if I'm not? What if something goes wrong and I can't? Then I'll be there, and we'll figure it out. You can't fix everything, Ronan. I know, but I can try. He wiped tears from her face. Lena, I need you to listen to me. Whatever happens, we're in this together. You're not alone. I know. And you're going to survive this, both of you. You can't know that. No, but I believe it, and I need you to believe it too. She wanted to. But the fear was so big, so overwhelming. "I'll try," she whispered. "That's all I ask." They lay together in the darkness, holding each other, both terrified of what was coming, but neither one willing to give up, because they'd come too far to quit now. By late November, Lena could barely move. She was enormous, her body heavy and awkward. Everything hurt: her back, her hips, her feet. Sleep was impossible. The baby pressed on her bladder constantly, making her get up a dozen times a night. But the baby was active, healthy. That was all that mattered. Ronan had finished all the preparations. The new room was ready, warm, and clean. They had supplies stocked, water stored, everything they could possibly need. Now all they could do was wait. And waiting was the hardest part. One evening in early December, as they sat by the fire, Lena felt a strange sensation. Not pain exactly, but pressure. Different from anything she'd felt before. She shifted uncomfortably. Ronan glanced over. "You okay?" "I don't know. Something feels off." He was beside her immediately. "What kind of off?" "I'm not sure, just different." They waited, watching. An hour later, Lena felt it again, a tightening across her stomach, like a band squeezing. I think this might be it," she said. Ronan's face went pale. "Are you sure?" "No, but maybe." They timed the sensations. They were irregular at first, coming and going. But over the next few hours, they became more frequent, more intense. By midnight, Lena knew. This was labor. And their daughter was coming, ready or not. Ronan moved into action the moment he understood what was happening. He'd prepared for this, spent months reading, planning, gathering supplies. But now that it was actually happening, his hands were shaking. "Okay," he said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Okay, let's get you to the room." Lena nodded, gripping his arm as another contraction hit. It wasn't unbearable yet, but she could feel the intensity building with each one. They made their way to the new room slowly. Ronan had set everything up exactly like the book said. Clean sheets on the bed, towels stacked nearby, the medical supplies laid out on a table where he could reach them easily. The wood stove was already burning, keeping the room warm. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, breathing through another contraction. When it passed, she looked up at Ronan. "You remember everything from the books?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so." He ran a hand through his hair. "First stage is the longest. Contractions get closer together and more intense. You're not supposed to push until—" "I know. I read them too." She managed a weak smile. "We've got this." "Right, we've got this." But neither of them sounded convinced. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fear and waiting. Lena had thought she understood what labor would be like. She'd read the descriptions, studied the diagrams, tried to prepare herself mentally. None of it came close to the reality. The contractions started as discomfort, manageable if she breathed through them. But over the hours, they intensified into waves of pain that took her breath away. Her entire body would seize up, muscles contracting, and all she could do was ride it out until it passed. Ronan stayed with her the whole time. He timed the contractions obsessively, writing down each one in a notebook. Between contractions, he helped her change positions, brought her water, wiped sweat from her forehead. "You're doing great," he kept saying. "I'm not. This is horrible." "I know, but you're still doing it. That's what matters." Around dawn, the contractions were coming every 5 minutes. Lena was exhausted, her whole body aching, and they hadn't even reached the hard part yet. "How much longer?" she gasped between contractions. Ronan checked his notes. The books say first-time mothers usually labor for 12 to 18 hours. You've been at it for about 6. 6? Lena wanted to cry. "That's all? I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just stay with me." "I'm not going anywhere." Another contraction hit, stronger than the others. Lena gripped Ronan's hand so hard she thought she might break his fingers. He didn't complain. When it passed, she collapsed back against the pillows, panting. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "You can. You're the toughest person I've ever met." "This is different. This is—" Another contraction cut her off. Ronan held her through it, murmuring encouragement, being the anchor she desperately needed. By midday, Lena was delirious with exhaustion and pain. The contractions were relentless now, coming so close together she barely had time to catch her breath between them. Her body was slick with sweat despite the cold. She'd thrown up twice. Everything hurt. Ronan checked her progress like the book had shown him, his hands gentle but his face pale. "You're getting close," he said. "Maybe another hour or two." "I can't do another hour." "You can. I know you can." But Lena wasn't so sure. Her body felt like it was being torn apart. The pain was beyond anything she'd ever experienced, beyond what she thought she could endure. "Ronan," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm scared." He climbed onto the bed beside her, pulling her against him. "I know, I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this. Both of you. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll deal with it. But right now, everything is going the way it should. You're doing everything right. It doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm dying. You're not dying. You're bringing our daughter into the world. And you're so strong, Lena, stronger than you know." She wanted to believe him, but another contraction hit, and all she could do was scream. Somewhere around 3 in the afternoon, everything changed. The contractions had been building in intensity, but suddenly Lena felt something different. A pressure so intense it made her feel like she was being split in half. "I need to push," she gasped. Ronan checked again, his hands shaking. "Not yet. You're close, but not quite. I need to push now." "Lena, the books say if you push too early." "I don't care what the books say." She bore down, her body taking over despite what her mind knew. Ronan moved quickly, positioning himself to help. Okay. If you need to push, then push. But try to do it controlled. Not too hard all at once." Lena tried, but her body had its own agenda. The urge to push was overwhelming, primal. She couldn't have stopped if she'd wanted to. She pushed with everything she had, feeling something shift inside her. "Good," Ronan said, though his voice was tight with fear. "That's good. Rest for a second, then push again with the next contraction." The next contraction came almost immediately. Lena pushed again, harder this time, and again, and again. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the pain and the pushing and Ronan's voice guiding her through it. "I can see her head," Ronan said at some point, his voice filled with awe and terror. "Just a little more, Lena. You're almost there." "I can't." "You are. You're doing it right now. Just keep going." Lena pushed again, feeling something give way. The pressure intensified to a point she didn't think was possible, and then relief. Sudden, overwhelming relief. And then a sound. A cry. Small and indignant and absolutely perfect. Lena collapsed back against the pillows, gasping for air, her whole body shaking. Ronan was moving fast, doing everything the books had said, clearing the baby's airway, tying off the cord, wrapping the tiny body in clean towels. Then he was beside her, placing the baby, their daughter, in Lena's arms. "She's here," he said, his voice cracking. "She's healthy. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Perfect." Lena looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature in her arms and felt her heart break open. She was real. After months of fear and uncertainty and pain, she was finally real. "Hi," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby girl." The infant's eyes opened, dark blue and unfocused, and she made a small sound. Ronan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at both of them with an expression of pure wonder. "We did it," Lena said. "You did it." He reached out, touched the baby's tiny hand. Her fingers curled around his, and he made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Look at her. She's so small." "She's perfect." "Yeah, she is." They sat like that for a long time, the three of them, while the afternoon light faded and the room grew dim. But they didn't notice. They were too lost in the moment, in the miracle of what they'd just accomplished. Eventually, Ronan stood. "I need to finish up, make sure everything's okay." He worked quickly and efficiently, checking Lena for complications, cleaning up, making sure the baby was warm and breathing well. Everything looked good. Better than good. Considering they'd done this alone, on a mountain, miles from any help, it was a miracle nothing had gone wrong. When he was satisfied, Ronan collapsed into a chair beside the bed, exhausted. "How are you feeling?" he asked Lena. "Like I just got hit by a truck." But also, she looked down at the baby. "Amazing. Is that weird?" "No, I feel the same way." He leaned forward, resting his head on the edge of the bed. I was so scared. The whole time I kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. Me too. But you did it anyway. You were incredible, Lena. We did it. Together. He looked up at her, his eyes red from exhaustion and emotion. I love you. Both of you. So much. We love you too. The baby stirred in Lena's arms, making small sounds. After a moment, she started to cry, a thin, reedy sound that somehow filled the entire cabin. Lena looked at Ronan, panicked. What do I do? I don't know. Try feeding her? Lena had read about breastfeeding, but reading about it and actually doing it turned out to be very different things. It took several attempts, both of them fumbling and frustrated, before the baby finally latched on. When she did, the crying stopped. She nursed hungrily, her tiny hands clenched into fists. Ronan watched in amazement. That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Which part? The baby or me figuring out how to feed her? Both. They sat in comfortable silence while the baby nursed, both of them too exhausted to do much more than exist. When the baby finally fell asleep, Lena asked, What should we name her? Ronan thought about it. I don't know. What do you think? I was thinking Clara, after my mom. Clara! He tried the name out. I like it. Yeah? Yeah. Clara Hale. It fits. Lena looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. Hi, Clara, she whispered. Welcome to the world. The first few days after Clara's birth were the hardest of Lena's life. Her body was wrecked. Everything hurt in ways she hadn't anticipated. Moving was agony. Sitting was agony. She bled more than the books had said was normal, and Ronan watched her like a hawk, terrified of complications. But slowly, day by day, she started to heal. And Clara grew stronger. The baby was demanding. She cried when she was hungry, when she was wet, when she was too hot or too cold, or just wanted to be held. Sleep became a distant memory for both Lena and Ronan. They took turns walking her around the cabin at night, trying to soothe her back to sleep. They changed diapers, cloth ones Lena had sewn from old shirts, constantly. They figured out how to bathe her without drowning her, how to swaddle her so she'd sleep, how to read the different kinds of cries. It was exhausting, overwhelming. There were moments when Lena sat in the rocking chair Ronan had built, Clara screaming in her arms, and cried right along with her. But there were also moments of incredible beauty. The first time Clara's eyes focused on Lena's face, and she smiled, probably just gas, but it felt like recognition. The way she curled against Ronan's chest when he held her, tiny and trusting. The sound of her breathing at night, soft and steady. Those moments made everything else worth it. One night, about a week after Clara's birth, Lena woke to find Ronan sitting by the fire with the baby in his arms. He was talking to her in a low voice, telling her about the mountain, about the life they were going to build together. Your mom is the bravest person I know, he was saying. She walked up this mountain in the middle of winter, refused to leave even when I was a complete jerk to her, and stayed when every rational person would have run. And then she brought you into the world like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing, Lena said from the doorway. Ronan looked up, smiling. I know, but you made it look easy. Liar. She crossed to them, sitting beside Ronan on the floor. What are you doing up? Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd let you rest. He looked down at Clara, who was awake and staring at him with wide eyes. Plus, I like talking to her, even if she doesn't understand yet. What were you telling her? About you, about us, about how lucky she is to have you as a mother. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Hormones, probably, but also love. I'm the lucky one, she said. Both of us are. Ronan shifted Clara so he was holding her with one arm, then put his other arm around Lena. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them, watching the fire burn low. And Lena realized something. This was what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not perfection, not ease, but this messy, exhausted, beautiful chaos. A family, a home, a place where she belonged. As winter deepened, the reality of their new life set in. Having a baby on the mountain was harder than either of them had anticipated. The constant vigilance, the worry that something might go wrong, the sheer physical exhaustion of caring for an infant while also maintaining everything else they needed to survive. But they found a rhythm. Ronan took over most of the outdoor work, checking traps, gathering firewood, hauling water. Lena focused on Clara and the indoor tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending. They worked as a team, covering for each other when one was too tired to function. And slowly, they adapted. Clara grew bigger, stronger. By her second month, she was sleeping for longer stretches at night. By her third month, she was smiling, real smiles, not just gas, and making cooing sounds that melted both their hearts. Ronan was completely smitten. He'd been terrified of being a father, but now he couldn't imagine life without her. He carved her toys, sang to her in a rough voice that somehow soothed her, let her sleep on his chest for hours while he sat perfectly still. One afternoon, Lena found him teaching Clara about the trees visible through the window. "That's a pine," he was saying, holding her up so she could see. "And that one's a spruce. They look similar, but if you know what to look for, you can tell the difference." Clara gurgled in response. Lena leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "She's 3 months old. She doesn't understand any of that." "She will eventually. Might as well start early." He glanced at Lena. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to see you've gone completely soft." "I have not." "You're teaching a baby about tree identification." "It's important knowledge." Lena crossed to them, kissing first Clara's head, then Ronan's cheek. "You're a good dad." "I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying. You're succeeding." He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "You really think so?" "I know so." That night, after Clara was asleep, Lena and Ronan sat on the porch despite the cold. They'd bundled up in heavy coats and blankets, watching the stars come out over the mountains. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Sure." "Do you ever regret this? Taking me in? Building this life?" Ronan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, never." "Why?" "Because it's hard. Harder than I think either of us expected. And I wonder sometimes if you wish you'd sent me away that first night." "I thought about it," he admitted. "That first week I kept waiting for you to prove me right. To quit and leave like the others. But I didn't. No, you didn't. And somewhere around week 2, I stopped waiting for you to leave and started hoping you'd stay." He turned to her. "You changed everything, Lena. Before you came, I was just surviving, going through the motions. But you made me want more." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you made me want to live again. Really live, not just exist." He took her hand. "And now, with Clara, I've never been happier, even with how hard it is." Lena squeezed his hand. "Me too. I came here running from something, but I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." "What's that?" "A reason to stop running." They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the stars. After a while, Ronan said, "You never told me the whole story, about what you were running from." Lena tensed. She'd known this conversation would come eventually, but that didn't make it easier. "Do you want to know?" she asked. "Only if you want to tell me." She thought about it. Part of her wanted to keep it buried, locked away where it couldn't hurt her, but Ronan had trusted her with everything, his fears, his past, his heart. She owed him the same. "His name was David," she said quietly. "We dated for 2 years. At first he was perfect, charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. But slowly, he changed, got more controlling, more jealous, started checking my phone, questioning where I'd been, who I'd talked to." Ronan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I tried to leave," Lena continued, "multiple times. But he'd always find me, always convince me to come back, or threaten me until I did. It got worse. He started getting physical, nothing too bad at first, just grabbing my arm too hard, pushing me. But it escalated. Lena, one night he choked me until I passed out. When I woke up, he was crying, apologizing, swearing it would never happen again. She took a shaky breath. That's when I knew I had to leave for good. Not just leave him, but disappear. So he couldn't find me. Did he look for you? I don't know. I hope not. I changed my name, paid cash for everything, didn't leave a trail. but I'm always waiting for him to show up, always looking over my shoulder. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If he ever comes here, he won't leave." The coldness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safe. "I know," she said. "I mean it, Lena. I won't let anyone hurt you, or Clara, not ever. I believe you." He pulled her close, and they sat like that under the stars, holding each other against the cold. Eventually, they went back inside, checked on Clara, still sleeping peacefully, and went to bed. But as Lena drifted off to sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Truly, completely safe. Spring came to the mountain in late March. The snow melted faster this year, revealing the clearing and the new growth already pushing through the dead grass. The creek roared with runoff. Birds returned, filling the air with sound. Clara was 6 months old now, sitting up on her own, babbling constantly. She'd started solid foods, mashed vegetables from their stores, meat broth Ronan made from game. She was curious about everything, reaching for objects, trying to put everything in her mouth. Watching her grow was both thrilling and terrifying. Every milestone felt like a miracle, but it also reminded them how fast time was moving. One morning, as Lena was feeding Clara mashed carrots, Ronan came in with an armload of wood. "We need to talk about the future," he said. Lena looked up. "Okay. What about it?" "About what happens when Clara gets older. She's going to need more than we can give her here. Education, socialization with other kids, medical care." Lena's stomach sank. She'd been trying not to think about this. "Are you saying we should leave?" "No. I'm saying we need to figure out how to balance this life with what she'll need. Maybe we make trips down to Timber Falls more often. Find a tutor who'd be willing to come up here. Something. We have time to figure that out. She's only 6 months old." "I know, but I want us to be thinking about it, planning for it." He sat down across from her. "I don't want to leave this place, Lena. This is home. But I also don't want Clara to suffer because of choices we made." "She won't suffer. We'll make sure of it." "How?" Lena thought about it. "We teach her everything we can. Reading, writing, math, about the land, about survival. And when she's old enough, we let her choose. If she wants to stay here, she can. If she wants to go somewhere else, we support that." Ronan nodded slowly. "Okay, I can live with that." Clara banged her spoon on the table, demanding attention. Both of them laughed. "One thing at a time," Lena said. "Right now, let's just focus on getting through the day without her wearing more food than she eats." "Good plan." As spring turned to summer, they fell into new routines. Ronan expanded the garden, planting more vegetables than before. They'd need the extra food with Clara growing so fast. Lena started teaching Clara simple words, pointing to objects and naming them over and over. "Tree, sky, papa, mama," Clara babbled back, not quite forming words yet, but trying. They took walks as a family, Ronan carrying Clara in a sling he'd made from canvas. They showed her the forest, the creek, the animals they saw. Clara loved it all, her eyes wide with wonder. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara in Lena's lap, Ronan said, "I never thought I could be this happy." "Me neither." "7 women came to this mountain before you," he said, "and I'm grateful to every single one who left, because if they hadn't, you might not have come." Lena smiled. "That's a nice way to look at it. It's true. They weren't right for this life, for me. But you," he reached over, touched her face. "You're perfect for it, for me, for all of this." "I'm not perfect." "No, but you're perfect for us." Clara chose that moment to grab a fistful of Lena's hair and yank. Lena yelped. Ronan laughed. "And she's perfect too, even when she's being a menace." They pried Clara's fingers loose, and she giggled, an actual genuine giggle that made both of them melt. "We're going to be okay," Lena said. "All 3 of us." "Yeah, we are." By Clara's first birthday, life on the mountain had become everything Lena had never known she wanted. They celebrated with a small cake Lena made from precious sugar and flour, singing to Clara while she smashed her hands into the frosting and laughed. Ronan had carved her a set of wooden blocks, sanded smooth so she wouldn't get splinters. She loved them, stacking them up just to knock them down over and over. That night, after Clara was asleep, Lena and Ronan sat by the fire. A year ago, I was terrified, Lena said. I didn't know if I could do this, be a mother, live this life. And now? Now I can't imagine doing anything else? Ronan pulled her close. You know what I realized today? What? A year and a half ago, I was alone on this mountain, convinced I'd always be alone, that I was better off that way. He kissed the top of her head. And now I have a family, a real family, because you were stubborn enough to stay. I'm glad I stayed. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low, both of them thinking about how far they'd come. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The creek babbled in the distance. Night birds called to each other in the darkness. But inside the cabin, everything was warm, safe, perfect in its imperfection. Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the pain, the desperate need to escape a life that was killing her. She'd climbed this mountain alone, carrying nothing but a backpack and hope. And she'd found everything she'd never known she was searching for. A place to call home, a man who loved her completely, a daughter who was the best of both of them. This life wasn't easy. It demanded everything they had and then asked for more. But it was theirs, built with their own hands, sustained by their own will, filled with a love that had been forged in the hardest conditions imaginable. 7 women had tried before her. 7 had fled when the mountain demanded too much. But Lena had stayed, not because she was stronger or braver or more capable, but because she'd found something worth fighting for. And she'd fought. Every single day, she'd fought. Against the cold, against the isolation, against her own fears and doubts. She'd fought, and she'd won. And now, sitting in this cabin with her family, watching the firelight dance across the walls, Lena knew with absolute certainty that every struggle had been worth it. Every moment of pain had led to this moment of peace. Every tear shed had watered the seeds of the life they'd grown together. The mountain hadn't broken her. It had made her, made them both. And together, they'd built something beautiful out of the wilderness. A life, a love, a legacy. Ronan's hand found hers in the darkness, and she squeezed back. No words needed, just touch. Just presence. Just the quiet certainty that they would face whatever came next together. The mountain still loomed outside, vast and indifferent. But it no longer scared them, because they'd learned its secrets, mastered its challenges, made peace with its harshness. And in doing so, they discovered the most important truth of all. Home wasn't a place you found. It was a place you built. With your own hands, your own heart, your own stubborn refusal to give up when everything told you to quit. And this cabin, this clearing, this mountain, this life, was home, their home, built on hope, sustained by love, defended by courage. And it would stand. Through whatever winters came, through whatever challenges they faced, it would stand. Because they had each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.